The great chamber fell silent as High Speaker Varel rose from his seat. His tall gray body cast a long shadow across the polished floor of the Galactic Senate. 12 species had gathered here today. 12 races that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. And they had come to discuss one thing: the humans. They spread like a disease, Vorel said, his voice echoing through the chamber. 200 years ago, they were trapped on a single world. Now they infest 14 planets. 14 in just 2 centuries. The representatives shifted in their seats. Some nodded. Others whispered among themselves. Fear lived in this room, and Vorel fed it carefully. They breed fast. They adapt faster. And they are always hungry for more. Vorel pressed a button, and images appeared in the air above them. Human cities. Human ships. Human soldiers. Our scientists have studied them. They are violent by nature. War is in their blood. It is only a matter of time before they turn their eyes toward us. Counselor Mira, a small being with soft blue skin, raised her hand. High Speaker, I have also studied the humans. They have never attacked any Senate world. They trade peacefully. They follow galactic law. Perhaps we judge them too quickly. Vorel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They follow our laws because they are weak, because they know they cannot win against us. But weakness does not last forever, Counselor. Would you wait until they are strong enough to threaten us? Would you gamble the lives of trillions on the hope that these creatures will remain peaceful? The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted their fears, their anger, their hatred for the young species that had risen so fast. Mira tried to speak again, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Vorel raised his hand, and silence returned. I propose that we end this threat before it begins. I call for a vote. Total war. Complete extermination. We will burn their worlds and scatter their ashes among the stars. In 100 years, no one will remember they ever existed. The vote was quick. 11 species raised their marks in favor. Only Mira voted against. She sat alone as the chamber celebrated, and she felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had read the old records. She had seen what humans did when they were cornered. But no one wanted to listen. Far across the galaxy, on a small blue world called Earth, Admiral Tae-woo stood in a dark room and watched the transmission. The Senate's declaration played on a screen before him. Behind him stood a dozen officers, all silent, all waiting for his response. They have made their choice, Tae-woo said quietly. His voice was calm, almost gentle. But his officers knew better. They had served under him for years. They knew the storm that lived behind those quiet eyes. Admiral, said Captain Yunahan, stepping forward. What are your orders? Tae-woo turned to face them. He was not a tall man, but in that moment, he seemed to fill the room. 80 years ago, we made first contact with the galaxy. We thought we would find friends among the stars. Instead, we found predators. Species that had conquered and enslaved others for sport. Races that saw us as nothing more than animals. He walked to a console and entered a code. The walls around them shifted, revealing hidden screens filled with data. Ships, weapons, battle plans. Decades of secret preparation. Smiled and traded with them. We bowed and followed their laws. And all the while we prepared, because we knew this day would come. Tae-woo looked at each officer in turn. They think we are primitive. They think we are weak. They have no idea what we truly are. The door opened, and Dr. Soo-jin entered. She was a thin woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. In her hand, she carried a keycard marked with a single symbol, a black sun. Admiral, she said, the Council has given approval. Vault 7 is ready to open. Tae-woo nodded slowly. Then let us show the Senate what happens when you corner humanity. Deep beneath the mountains of Earth, there was a place that did not officially exist. Vault 7 had been built in secret, funded by every nation, hidden from every satellite. For 80 years, the brightest minds of humanity had worked here. They had created things that should never exist. Weapons that could crack worlds. Viruses that could target specific species. Ships that could move through dimensions the Senate did not even know existed. Dr. Su. Jin led Taewoo through the cold corridors. Around them, machines hummed with terrible power. Scientists in white coats watched them pass with hollow eyes. They knew what they had built. They knew what it would be used for. "Everything is ready," Sujin said. "The fleet can be deployed within 72 hours. The biological agents within 1 week. The dimensional drives within 1 month. And the cost." Taewoo asked. Sujin was silent for a moment. "If we use everything, if we hold nothing back, we can win. But the galaxy will never be the same. And neither will we." Taewoo stopped walking. He stood before a great metal door, the entrance to the deepest part of the vault. Beyond it lay the weapons that would decide the fate of humanity. "The fate of the galaxy? They killed themselves the moment they voted for our extinction," he said softly. "They just do not know it yet." He placed his hand on the scanner. The door began to open, and cold light spilled out into the corridor. Somewhere above them, the stars continued to shine. But soon, many of those stars would go dark. On the Senate station, the celebrations continued. Vorel accepted congratulations and praise. He had saved the galaxy from the human threat. History would remember him as a hero. Only Mira did not celebrate. She sat alone in her quarters, staring at a human book she had collected years ago. It was a history of their wars, their conflicts, their endless struggle for survival. The pages were filled with blood and fire and stubborn, relentless will. "You fools," she whispered to herself. "You have no idea what you have awakened." And in the darkness of space, humanity began to move. The sky above Jeju 4 turned black with ships. 3,000 Senate warships descended through the clouds like a swarm of metal insects. Admiral Keth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Decree, and watched the human colony below. It was a beautiful world. Green forests, blue oceans, white cities gleaming in the sunlight. Soon, it would all be ash. "Open a channel," Keth ordered. Standard subjugation message. His communication officer nodded and began the broadcast. The message was simple: surrender immediately, or face complete destruction. The Senate had used this message 100 times before. Every species had surrendered. Every species had bowed, but the humans did not respond. Keth waited. 1 minute. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. The silence stretched on, heavy and strange. His officers exchanged confused looks. This had never happened before. "Perhaps their communication systems are damaged," someone suggested. "No," Keth said slowly. "They received the message. They are choosing not to answer." He felt something cold move through his chest. It was not quite fear. Not yet. But it was close. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Show them the price of defiance." The fleet opened fire. Plasma rained down on the surface like burning tears. 2 cities vanished in moments, replaced by craters of molten glass. Millions of humans died in the first minutes of the battle. Keth watched without emotion. This was war. This was necessary. Then the humans answered. The ground itself seemed to split open. What Keth had thought were civilian buildings revealed themselves to be weapons platforms. Railguns the size of towers rose from hidden bunkers. Energy shields flickered to life over the remaining cities. And from the forests, from the mountains, from places no sensor had detected, human ships began to launch. "Admiral." His tactical officer shouted. "We have contacts emerging from." He stopped, his face going pale. "Everywhere. They are coming from everywhere." Keth spun to face the main screen. Behind his fleet, where there had been nothing but empty space, ships were appearing. Human ships. They had been invisible, hidden by technology the Senate did not possess. And they were already firing. Captain Yunahan sat in the command chair of the Silent Thunder and smiled grimly. Her stealth fleet had waited in the darkness for 3 days, silent and patient. Now the trap was sprung. "All ships," she said calmly. "Execute attack pattern storm. No mercy. No hesitation." The human fleet struck the Senate formation from behind. Missiles tore through unprepared ships. Railgun rounds punched through armor like paper. The Senate ships tried to turn to respond, but they were caught between the planet's defenses and the stealth fleet. Lieutenant Hyen-Q gripped his flight controls as his fighter screamed through the chaos. He was 23 years old. This was his first battle. All around him, ships were dying in flowers of flame. His squadron had lost 4 pilots in the first minute. "Stay tight," his squadron leader shouted over the radio. "Focus on the cruisers. Take out their weapons." Hugh followed orders. He fired his missiles, watched them strike a Senate ship, saw the explosion bloom in the darkness. But there was no time to celebrate. More enemies were coming. Always more. His weapons ran dry. His ship was damaged. Warning lights screamed at him from every panel. And ahead, a massive Senate cruiser was turning its guns toward the civilian transport ships trying to flee the planet. Daesung Hyen-Q called to his wingman. "Are you seeing this?" "I see it," Daesung replied. His voice was steady, but Hyen-Q could hear the fear beneath it. "Our weapons are empty. We cannot stop it." Hyen-Q looked at the cruiser, looked at the transports full of families, children, innocent people, and he made his choice. "Ram it," he said. "What?" "We rammed the cruiser. Hit the engine section. We eject at the last moment." There was silence on the radio. Then Daesung laughed, a wild and broken sound. "You are insane." "I like it. Let us go." The 2 fighters accelerated toward the cruiser. Enemy fire filled the space around them, but they were small and fast and lucky. At the last possible second, they ejected. Their ships continued forward and struck the cruiser's engines. The explosion was massive, beautiful, terrible. The cruiser began to fall, its weapons going silent. Hyen-Q floated in his escape pod and watched. He was crying, though he did not know when he had started. Around him, the battle continued to rage. But for one moment, he had saved those transports. He had saved those people. On the eternal decree, Admiral Keth watched his fleet die. 40% of his ships were gone. 40% in just 6 hours. This was supposed to be a simple conquest. This was supposed to be easy. "We must retreat," his first officer said. "Admiral, please. We cannot win this battle." Keth's hands were shaking. He had fought a dozen wars. He had conquered a dozen worlds. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans fought without fear. They fought without hesitation. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as weapons. When their ships were destroyed, they continued fighting in escape pods with hand weapons. "What are they?" he whispered. He opened a channel to the Senate. High Speaker Vorel's face appeared on the screen, calm and confident. "Admiral Keth, I trust the conquest is proceeding well." "High Speaker," Keth's voice cracked. "We need reinforcements. The humans. They are not what we expected. They fight like they have nothing to lose. They fight like demons." Vorel frowned. "You have 3,000 ships. They are primitives with inferior technology. How can they possibly resist?" They were hiding. Their true weapons, their true ships, they were hiding them all along. This is a trap. The whole planet is a trap. Vorel's frown deepened. "Get control of yourself, Admiral. You are embarrassing the Senate. I will send reinforcements, but I expect results. Do not fail me again." As the transmission ended, Keth stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by the sounds of battle and death. He thought about Vorel's confidence, his arrogance, his absolute certainty that the humans would fall easily, and for the first time in his long career, Admiral Keth felt true fear, far away on the Senate station. Counselor Mira watched the battle reports come in. The numbers were impossible. The Senate fleet was being destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. She began to copy the reports to save them in secret files. Someone would need to remember what happened here. Someone would need to tell the truth. She looked out her window at the stars and wondered how many of them would still be shining when this war finally ended. 6 months had passed since the war began. 6 months of blood and fire and death. The Senate believed they were winning. They had destroyed 3 human colonies. They had killed 8 million human civilians. They celebrated their progress and made plans for final victory. They did not understand that. Humanity was just getting started. Admiral Tae-woo stood before Earth's United Council. The Great Hall was silent as he spoke. Every leader of every nation watched him with tired, angry eyes. They had all lost people. They had all lost worlds. And they were all hungry for revenge. The Senate thinks we are beaten, Tae-woo said. They think that if they kill enough of us, we will surrender. They do not understand us. They do not understand that every death makes us stronger. Every lost colony makes our resolve harder. He pressed a button and images appeared above the council. The destroyed colonies. The dead civilians. The children who would never grow up. The families who would never be reunited. 8 million Tae-woo continued. 8 million of our people murdered by those who called us primitive, who declared us animals to be exterminated. His voice was calm, but beneath it burned something terrible. I propose the mirror doctrine. For every human they kill, we kill 10 of theirs. For every city they burn, we burn 10 of theirs. We will show them that war with humanity has a price they cannot pay, the council voted. The decision was unanimous. Deep beneath the earth, Dr. Soo-jin prepared humanity's true weapons. For 80 years, she had built things that haunted her dreams. Now, those nightmares would be set free. The faster-than-light missiles are ready, she told Tae-woo as they walked through the vault. We can strike any Senate world within hours. Their defenses cannot track weapons that move through folded space. And the swarms? 10 billion attack drones, controlled by artificial intelligence. They learn, adapt, and multiply. Once released, they will spread through Senate space like a plague of metal. Tae-woo nodded slowly. What about the biological agents? Soo-jin stopped walking. Her face was pale, haunted. We have developed specific viruses for each Senate species. Non-contagious to humans. 90% lethal to targets. She paused. Admiral, once we use these weapons, there is no going back. We will become what they accused us of being. They gave us no choice, Tae-woo replied. They wanted our extinction. We will give them theirs. The counteroffensive began at midnight, Earth time. Across the galaxy, human fleets emerged from hidden bases. They struck supply lines, destroyed shipyards, and burned military outposts. But the true terror came from the missiles that appeared without warning in orbit above. Senate War/Captain Yuna Han led the attack on Voral's planet. Her fleet dropped out of hyperspace just beyond the defense grid. Before the Senate forces could respond, she had already launched 16 missiles, each carrying enough firepower to destroy a continent. They folded through space, bypassing every defense, every shield, every weapon the Senate had built over thousands of years. In 47 minutes, every military installation on the planet was gone. Every shipyard, every weapons factory, every defense platform. But Yuna Han did not fire on the cities. She did not kill the civilians. Instead, she left a message burning in orbit, written in letters of nuclear fire that could be seen from the surface. Next time, we will not stop. High Speaker Voral watched from his shelter as his world's defenses crumbled. For the first time since the war began, he understood. The humans had been holding back. Everything the Senate had faced so far was just a fraction of their true power. This is impossible, he whispered. They were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be weak. But the humans were not finished. 3 Senate species secretly contacted Earth, begging for separate peace. They offered information, resources, anything to escape the war. Admiral Tae-woo's response was cold and final. You voted as one. You declared our extinction as one. You will answer as one. There will be no separate peace. There will be no mercy for those who stood with our enemies. The war continued. Lieutenant Han-kyu, now promoted to commander, led a boarding action against the Senate flagship. His team of 50 soldiers cut through the enemy ship like a blade through water. They fought through corridors filled with alien defenders, never stopping, never retreating. In the end, they reached the bridge and captured Admiral Keth alive. Hugh stood over the fallen admiral, his armor covered in blood, his breath heavy in his helmet. Keth looked up at him with eyes full of confusion and fear. "Why?" Keth asked. "Why do you fight so hard? You could flee. You could find another galaxy. Start again. Why do you choose this? This madness?" Heian Q removed his helmet. His face was young, but his eyes were old. Old with grief. Old with rage. Old with the weight of everything he had seen and done. "Running is not in our nature," he said quietly, "and neither is forgetting. You killed our people, our families, our children. Did you think we would simply accept that? Did you think we would just disappear?" Keth had no answer. "Every name," Hugh continued. "We remember every name, every face, every story, and we will make sure you remember them too." On the Senate station, the alliance began to crack. Species blamed each other for the disaster. Old rivalries resurfaced. Fear turned to anger, and anger turned to chaos. Counselor Mira watched it all, recording everything. She knew this was only the beginning. At night, she read her human books. She studied their history, their wars, their terrible capacity for both destruction and creation. And she understood something the Senate never had. Humans were not primitive. They were patient. They had smiled and traded and waited, building their strength in secret, preparing for the day when they would need it. And now that day had come. Admiral Tae Woo looked at the star map in his command center. Human fleets were marked in blue, spreading across the galaxy like a rising tide. Soon they would reach the Senate's capital. Soon this war would end. 80 million humans have died, his aide reported. The Senate has lost 400 million. Tae Woo nodded slowly. The numbers were terrible. The cost was beyond calculation. But humanity would survive. Humanity would win. And the galaxy would never threaten them again. "Prepare the final offensive," he ordered. "It is time to finish this." The stars continued to burn. But soon, many of them would witness the end of the Galactic Senate. 1 year after the Senate declared war, their empire was dying. For member species had been broken completely, their fleets destroyed, their planets occupied. 2 more had gone extinct after trying to use weapons of mass destruction against human civilians. The retaliation had been swift and absolute. Entire worlds had been sterilized, their populations wiped from existence. Humanity had become the thing the Senate feared, and they were coming for the heart of galactic civilization. High Speaker Voral stood in his chamber and stared at the communication screen. His face was gray with exhaustion and fear. Across from him, the image of Admiral Tae Woo waited patiently. "We can end this," Voral said. His voice was weak, broken. "We can negotiate. Surely there are terms we can agree upon." "There are terms," Tae Woo replied. "Unconditional surrender. The complete disbandment of the Senate. Reparations for 300 years. And war crime tribunals for everyone who voted for our extermination." Voral's face twisted with anger. "That is not negotiation. That is destruction. You chose destruction when you voted to kill us all. These are the consequences." "I refuse," Voral spat. "We still have strength. We still have ships. You will not dictate terms to us." Tae Woo smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Then we will see you at Nexus Prime." The transmission ended. Voral turned to his generals with desperate eyes. "The Hidden Fleet. It is time." For months, the Senate had been gathering ships in secret. 10,000 vessels hidden in a distant nebula, waiting for the right moment. It was their last hope, their final chance to turn the tide. They would ambush the human fleet at Nexus Prime and crush them once and for all. But humanity had secrets of their own. Dr. Sue. Jin had spent the war studying the Senate's communication network. It connected every ship, every station, every world. And she had found a way inside. "The Cascade Protocol is ready," she reported to Admiral Tae Woo. "When activated, it will infect their entire network. Their ships will lose coordination. Their weapons will malfunction. Their shields will fail. How long will it last?" "Long enough." The Battle of Nexus Prime began at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. 3,000 human ships dropped out of hyperspace near the Senate's capital station. It was the largest orbital structure ever built, a monument to galactic civilization. Home to millions, and it was defended by 10,000 hidden ships. Captain Unahan's voice crackled over the communication system. Sensors are detecting a massive fleet emerging from the nebula. 10,000 vessels. They were waiting for us. Tae-woo studied the tactical display. His fleet was outnumbered 3-1. By any normal calculation, they would lose. But this was not a normal war. All ships execute attack formation. Dr. Sujin, activate the Cascade Protocol. Across the Senate fleet, chaos erupted. Ships lost contact with each other. Weapon systems crashed. Navigation computers gave impossible orders. 10,000 vessels became 10,000 isolated targets, confused and vulnerable. The human fleet struck like lightning. Missiles tore through disabled shields. Railguns punched holes in ships that could not maneuver. Fighters swarmed around cruisers that could not coordinate their defense. But the Senate ships were not helpless. Even in chaos, they fought back. Human vessels exploded. Human pilots died. The darkness of space was filled with the light of destruction. Captain Unahan led her carrier, the Silent Thunder, into the heart of the enemy formation. Her ship was damaged, its shields failing, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere. But she continued forward, her crew fighting alongside her until the very end. Admiral, she transmitted, her voice steady despite everything. I have a clear shot at the enemy command ship, but my weapons are gone. I have only one option left. Tae-woo closed his eyes. He knew what she was saying. He knew he could not stop her. Una, he said quietly, you have served with honor. Thank you, Admiral. There was a pause. Tell my daughter I kept my promise. Tell her I kept Earth safe. The Silent Thunder accelerated toward the Senate command ship. Enemy fire tore through its hull. Sections exploded. Crew members died. But Unahan held course, transmitting targeting data until the very last second. The collision was visible across the entire battlefield. The Senate command ship broke apart, its bridge vaporizing in an instant. Thousands of enemy officers died, including most of the Senate's remaining military leadership. Commander Hun-kyu watched from his fighter. Tears ran down his face, but he did not stop fighting. None of them stopped. The battle raged for 12 hours. When it ended, the Senate fleet was destroyed. 8,000 enemy ships drifted as wreckage among the stars. The survivors surrendered or fled, and the human fleet moved toward Nexus Prime. Hin-kyu led the ground assault. His soldiers stormed the station, fighting through corridors and chambers, hunting down the leaders who had condemned humanity to death. They found High Speaker Vorel trying to escape in a private shuttle. They captured him and dragged him before the cameras. Counselor Mira surrendered peacefully. She handed over her archives willingly, every record she had kept of the Senate's crimes. She had known this day would come. She had prepared for it in a holding cell. Admiral Kef sat and waited for his fate. When Hyeon-kyu came to see him, the old alien looked up with empty eyes. How many of my people are dead? Kef asked. Billions, Hyeon-kyu replied. Across all your species. Billions. Keth nodded slowly. I tried to warn them. After Jeju 4, I tried to tell them what you were. They did not listen. What are we? Q asked. Keith was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. You are what happens when evolution creates a species too stubborn to die, too angry to surrender, too ... human to accept extinction. In another cell, High Speaker Vorel screamed at his guards. He demanded release. He threatened, he begged, but no one listened. His power was gone. His empire was ash, and soon he would face justice for his crimes. On Earth, the celebrations were quiet. Too many had died for joy. 94 million humans had been lost. Families had been destroyed. Worlds had been burned. Victory had come at a price almost too high to pay. Admiral Tae-woo stood in his office and looked at the casualty reports. Each number was a life. Each name was a story that had ended too soon. He thought about Captain Yunahan, about her sacrifice, about the daughter who would grow up without her mother. "We won," his aide said softly. "Yes," Tae-woo replied. "We won." But as he looked out at the stars, he wondered if humanity would ever be the same. They had survived. They had conquered. But in doing so, they had become something new, something harder, something darker. The war was over, but the galaxy would never forget what humanity had done, and neither would humanity itself. 50 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Galactic Senate no longer existed, its grand chambers empty and abandoned. Of the 12 species that had voted to destroy humanity, 4 were completely extinct, their worlds silent monuments to their arrogance. 3 more survived only as protected populations, their numbers carefully controlled, their movements restricted, their futures uncertain. The remaining 5 had been absorbed into the human Concordat, the new empire that now ruled the stars. Humanity had won. But victory, as they discovered, carried its own weight. Admiral Tae-woo, now an old man with white hair and tired eyes, walked slowly through the corridors of Memorial Station. The structure orbited Earth, a massive ring of black stone that could be seen from the planet's surface on clear nights. Inside its walls were the names of every human who had died in the war. 94 million names carved into stone that would last forever. He stopped before a familiar section. Captain Yunahan, Commander Kim Dae-sung, Lieutenant Park Ji-yun, names he had known, faces he still remembered, friends he had sent to their deaths. "You should not come here alone," a voice said behind him. Tae-woo turned to see Counselor Mira walking toward him. She was old now, too. Her blue skin faded to pale gray, her movements slow and careful. But her eyes were still sharp, still filled with the intelligence that had made her the only Senate member to vote against the war. "I come here every year on this day," Tae-woo said. "It helps me remember why we fought, what we lost, what we became." Mira stood beside him and looked at the names. She had spent the last 50 years documenting the war, every battle, every death, every decision. Her archives were the most complete record of those terrible years, studied by historians across the galaxy. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "What humanity became?" Tae-woo was silent for a long time. Round them, other visitors moved through the memorial, touching names, leaving flowers, crying softly. Families who had lost parents. Children who had never known their grandparents. An entire generation marked by grief. "We did not choose this," he finally said. "We did not want to become conquerors. We wanted to explore the stars, to find friends among the aliens, to build something beautiful." He touched the wall gently. "But you gave us no choice. When faced with extinction, we discovered there was nothing we would not do to survive." He turned to face Mira. "The Mirror Doctrine killed 2.3 billion aliens. Dr. Sujin's illogical weapons erased 2 entire species from existence. We glassed worlds. We destroyed civilizations. We became the monsters you accused us of being." His voice cracked. "So yes, I regret it. I regret it every day. But I would do it again, because the alternative was death." Mira nodded slowly. She understood. She had always understood, even when her own people had refused to listen. Far across the galaxy, on a peaceful colony world called New Sol, Admiral Haen-kyu sat on the porch of his home and watched his granddaughter play in the garden. She was 7 years old, with bright eyes and a smile that could light up a room. She had never known war. She had never seen the darkness that her grandfather carried in his heart. "Grandfather," she called, running up to him. "Why do humans rule the galaxy?" Haen-kyu lifted her onto his lap and looked up at the stars. They were beautiful tonight, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black cloth. Somewhere among them were the ruins of the Senate. Somewhere among them were the graves of 94 million humans and billions of aliens. "It is a long time ago," he said softly. Some very foolish beings decided we should die. They gathered their fleets and announced our extinction. They thought we were weak. They thought we would surrender. What happened? His granddaughter asked. They were wrong. Hugh held her close. And we made sure no one would ever make that mistake again. On Earth, at the old memorial garden outside the former United Council building, a ceremony was taking place. Every year, survivors and their families gathered here to remember Captain Unahan and the crew of the Silent Thunder, sacrifice, had turned the Battle of Nexus Prime, had broken the Senate's last hope for victory. She was a hero, her name known by every human child. Her daughter, now a woman of 67, walked slowly to the statue at the center of the garden. It showed Unahan as she had been at the end, standing proud on her bridge, facing death without fear. The sculptor had captured something in her eyes, determination that still moved people to tears 50 years later. The old woman placed flowers at the base of the statue. Behind her, hundreds of people watched in silence. Some had served with her mother. Some were descendants of people she had saved. All of them remembered. A young alien child, one of the integrated species, tugged at her parent's hand. "Who is that?" the child asked, pointing at the statue. The parent, a tall being with green skin and gentle eyes, knelt beside their child. "She is a reminder," they said. "Reminder that humans will do anything, absolutely anything, to protect what they love. She gave her life so that others could live, so that Earth would be safe." "Is that why nobody declares war on humans anymore?" the child asked. "Yes," the parent replied. "That is exactly why." Back at Memorial Station, Counselor Mira prepared her final recording. Her health was failing. Soon, she would join the billions who had died because of a war that should never have happened. But before she went, she wanted to leave one last message for the galaxy. "The Senate announced war against humans and triggered their own extinction," she said, her voice steady despite her weakness. "They let this be remembered. They chose this fate. They voted for genocide and received it in return. Humanity did not start this war. Humanity did not want this war. But when forced to fight, they fought with everything they had." She paused, looking out the window at Earth below. Such a small world. Such a young species. And yet they had brought the mighty Galactic Senate to its knees. "The tragedy is not that humanity won," she continued. "The tragedy is that none of this was necessary. We could have been friends. Could have built something beautiful together. Instead, we chose fear. We chose arrogance. We chose extinction." Her eyes were wet with tears. "Future generations learn from our mistake. Do not threaten those who fight for survival. Do not corner those who have nothing to lose. And never, ever underestimate humanity." She ended the recording and sat in silence. Outside, the stars continued to shine, indifferent to the suffering below them. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the borders of their new empire. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the Senate species rebuilt their shattered lives under human supervision. The war was over. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, but the scars would last forever, carved into stone and memory in the hearts of all who had lived through those terrible years. Admiral Tae Woo stood at the window of Memorial Station and watched the sun rise over Earth. He thought about all the people he had lost, all the orders he had given, all the weight he had carried for 50 years. Was it worth it? He asked himself, not for the first time, and like always, he had no answer. Below him, Earth continued to turn. Children played in parks. Families shared meals together. A new generation grew up in peace, never knowing how close they had come to extinction. That was the answer, he supposed. That was why they had fought, why they had killed, why they had become monsters, so that humanity could live. So that somewhere, a little girl could ask her grandfather about the stars, never knowing that those same stars had once threatened to go dark forever. The silence after the war was not peace. It was not forgiveness. It was simply survival, bought with blood and fire and the terrible price of becoming exactly what their enemies had feared. But humanity endured. Humanity always endured, and the galaxy would never forget why.